And in this video, we hear from the pathologist in court who describes the murder of Tucker, Tate and Rolfe, and more specifically, how these shotgun wounds were inflicted to these individuals.
Hello. Hello, police. Yeah, what's the problem, sir?
We just drove down our farm track.
Yeah.
Go and feed our pheasants. We come across a Range Rover with 3 people in it.
Yeah.
It appears that they're dead. I don't know what's happening. Blood in the motor all over them.
And welcome back to a new video on the Essex Boys case. As always, if you are enjoying the content, please do give the video a thumbs up. And if you're interested in the Essex Boys case, or simply true crime in general, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below. Of the witnesses at the scene, the last of importance was Dr. Paula Lanas, the pathologist. She attended at 12:15 on the 6th of December and saw the 3 victims dead in the Range Rover. She described the wounds. The driver had a shotgun wound just below the right ear with an exit wound through the left eye. Damage was there to the right side of the headrest just above his seat. The front passenger was nearly upright and had shotgun wounds both over the right side of his face, and there was blood splattered inside the vehicle and the windscreen, mainly on the passenger side. The rear passenger was leaning to his left and his head resting on the lower edge of the near side rear passenger window, which was shattered. Fragments of bone and brain protruded through a shotgun wound over the back of his head, and a missile graze, a superficial wound, ran over the top of his head. 3 blue shotgun shells lay near a tyre track in the snow, alongside the driver's door, and 2 blue shells lay in the snow behind the rear near side of the car. Deep, mud-filled tyre tracks passed out of the gate about 20 metres beyond it, and small puddles of slightly muddied water with red staining filled the tyre tracks. There was bleeding from the car up to the gate and beyond. At 7:15, the bodies were removed from the car at Southwood and Ferrers police station. Then she spoke about what she found standing there when they were removed at the police station. She said the front passenger, that would be Tucker, grasped the mobile phone between his legs. His head rested on his right shoulder. Wounds were identified over the right temple and over the right angle of the jaw. Moving to the rear passenger Tate, she said the rear passenger grasped the mobile phone in his right hand with the strap wrapped around his middle finger. Shotgun wounds were present over the back of his head and on the right side of his chest. Missile graze over the top of his head. Fragments of glass were present around his left ear. The driver, Rolfe, had a large shotgun wound over the right angle of his jaw with a burn over the right side of the neck. The second shotgun wound was behind the right ear with an exit wound over the left side of the face. Further shotgun shells were recovered from the back of the car, near the aluminium strip at the bottom of the offside rear door and in the pocket of the driver's door. Dr. Lanas conducted a post-mortem on the body of Patrick Tate at 11:10 that day, on the body of Tucker at 12:30 and on the body of Craig Rolfe at 13:50. Her conclusions were as follows. As to the specific wounds that their bodies had suffered, she ascribed the cause of death in each case to be shotgun wounds. Though Tate's head wound was consistent with the weapon being discharged close to the skin, and his chest wound consistent with being discharged near the body. Tucker's wounds were consistent with the weapon being discharged close to his head, as were Rolfe's wounds. In no case was there any evidence that any victim had attempted to defend himself. She was cross-examined, and to Mr. Parkins she said that the purpose of her being called to the scene was for many reasons. She conceded the main reason was to assist with the timing of death. It was also to see the bodies in situ. The vehicle was taken away on a low loader with the bodies inside, and there was a chance that body positions might alter. Okay, so a few things to pick up on here. Now, Dr. Lanas concedes during this court process that the main reason that she was there at the crime scene was to assist with the timing of death, something which was never ever done. Quite interesting. But even more interesting than that, I believe, is the vehicle being taken away on the low loader. Now, it's important to remember that these three individuals, Patrick Tate, Tony Tucker and Craig Rolfe, none of these individuals were wearing a seatbelt. This low loader now needs to travel along the bumpy farm track with the Range Rover on the back. The bodies aren't secured in any way, shape or form. So they're going to move, aren't they? Naturally, these bodies are going to move. That's why I don't put much stock into the photographs which were taken back at the police pound, with Craig Rolfe's left foot being on the brake and, you know, his hand being in this certain position. You can tell that actually the bodies have been moved before the photographs were taken because of the blood drips on the steering wheel. They're going the wrong direction. I don't know whether they needed to possibly straighten the wheels of the Range Rover or some sort of adjustment to the Range Rover steering needed to be done in order to get it on the low loader or off the low loader, but certainly some adjustment of that steering wheel has been made before the photographs were taken. Asked again about the time of death, she said the time of death was not easy to achieve with great accuracy. The time of death can be important. Quote, "If it were a feature of my examination, I will examine the body temperature and the ambient temperature, that is the temperature all round of the surrounding conditions. I'd examine the degree and extent of the rigor mortis. It can take 12 hours to come and it lasts 12 hours. Hypostasis, that is the gravity settling of the blood falling to the lower parts of the body, was another factor. She was asked about the deep mud-filled tyre tracks and she said they were the same for 20 yards. It was almost as if the vehicle had gone in past the gate and reversed out. Which you'll understand, of course, that really she was there for her medical opinion rather than for her observation of the scene." Okay, let's just interject here briefly. The talk of the tyre tracks. Now, this is a really fascinating aspect of this case and probably I guess, less talked about aspect of this case also. The photograph that you see in front of you, you can see in this photograph that the tyre tracks of the Range Rover extend beyond the front of that vehicle. Basically what that means is that the Range Rover at some point in time was further forward than where you see it in this photograph. What Dr. Lanas is saying here is that the tyre tracks extended through the locked 5-bar gate, 20 yards beyond the Range Rover. So take a look at the photograph in front of you here. You can clearly see that the exact same tread pattern of that Range Rover, of those front tyres, has gone beyond where that Range Rover has parked. So at some point in time, it's gone further forward than where it is situated. So does that mean Craig Rolfe pulled up to the gate maybe a little bit too close, and the fourth passenger possibly said, knock it back a bit, the gate opens towards us, we've got to get the gate open, something like that? Or has the Range Rover actually gone beyond the locked 5-bar gate? Now, this is where we get the tinfoil hat on, shall we say. Because recently, in a CCRC appeal document, Michael Steele, I have to try and say this without breaking into a little chuckle, Michael Steele said that it was possible for the gatepost to have been lifted out and for the Range Rover to have been driven through into the field. It gets a little bit confusing. Let's just play this little clip of the CCRC appeal document and you'll hear exactly what I'm talking about. Section 82. In his submissions regarding the scene of the crime, Mr. Steele also observes, after studying the crime scene photographs, that the gate which was in front of the vehicle appears to be capable of being opened without unlocking the chain, as one of the gateposts, quote, appears to be capable of removal from its footing, end quote. Mr. Steele also points out that there appears to be tyre tracks on the opposite side of the gate. The Commission has been provided with images which depict these tracks. It is suggested that the Range Rover may have arrived in Workhouse Lane from this direction. The Commission has considered this theory but considers it to be pure speculation. There is no new evidence to suggest that the Range Rover actually did arrive in Workhouse Lane from the other direction. Okay, so what Michael Steele is saying here is that the gate, according to this photograph, according to the crime scene photographs, a photograph of the gate in front of you, that gate could be lifted out of its footing. Therefore, it would negate the need for keys to open the chain. What he's also saying is that the Range Rover approached from the other side of that locked 5-bar gate. Now, I'm not saying that that's not a possibility in terms of the fact that you could lift this gate out of his footing. I'm certainly not saying that. But why would the Range Rover go through the locked 5-bar gate from the other direction? So basically it'd be facing the opposite way as to what this photograph is showing you. So it'd be almost driving back down Workhouse Lane. Why would the Range Rover do that and then somehow turn itself around to be facing the locked gate? To me, it doesn't really make much logical sense. And I think that was basically backed up by the CCRC's findings in this case. What I am quite interested in, however, is this almost, I guess, desire in this summing up in court document, in the judge's speech here, to almost downplay their existence, the tyre track's existence. And this isn't the first time this has been mentioned. If we go back to the Dr. Yankee Prasad, the first doctor who attended the crime scene, he also mentioned tyre tracks. All he said was that the tyre tracks looked fresh. But then the excuse they gave for that was that the tracks beyond the gate were deeper, therefore they looked new. And then we have Dr. Paula Lanas coming forward here and saying the tracks looked the same. So not only the fact that they look new, but the tyre tracks actually looked the same, as if it extended on beyond the locked 5-bar gate. But yet again, these are simply downplayed as, this is a person who was there to ascertain a time of death, supposedly, and she wasn't there for her opinions on the crime scene. What I would be interested in hearing, though, is your thoughts in the comments section below. As we can see clearly here that the tracks do extend beyond the point where the Range Rover is located. Let's just surmise that they do in fact extend beyond the locked 5-bar gate. What would be the purpose of going through the locked 5-bar gate and then reversing back into the position that they are then discovered in? Do leave your own thoughts and theories on that one in the comments section below. But let's continue on from where we left off. So far as Tate is concerned, she said she cannot give the order of wounds, especially if they were very close in time. There was a shotgun wound to the head and the head may swing. The first wound originated from the left, so did the second, but the one to the chest came from the right. Quote, Tucker's injuries were under the neck. I thought he had 2 shots from the near side. I didn't identify any damage to Tate's hands, and if there had been any injury from breaking a window, I would have noticed it. There was no flesh injury to the hands. Then Mr. Lederman came to cross-examine. She said again that Tucker had 3 separate entry wounds to his head and 3 separate shots entered and more or less stayed in his head. Tate was shot 3 times and in respect of the superficial graze, there were a few pellets but no wadding. Rolfe was shot from the offside of the head moving to the near side. If Tate was shot from the offside, he could have been thrown to the near side of the car. Quote, I cannot exclude he may have moved to the near side. He slumped over. One would assume after he has been shot, he has fallen across the seat. Tucker's head had rolled to the offside. Then she was asked the same question about the possibility of Tucker's wound coming after the shot had passed across Tate's head. She said it may be that the shot Tucker received came from the near side of the car and first went through Tate. She was asked the question, could the superficial wound to Tate have ended up in Tucker and caused his head to move to the offside? Her answer, such as it was, you may think not very helpful. She said, quote, I find it difficult to answer such a question. It means getting trajectories of those wounds. End quote. She said, quote, I provide the location of the injuries and the cause of death. Anything after that is done by someone else. It is a team investigation and we all consult with each other. It is a ballistic expert who can more properly deal with that. End quote. Then coming back to the time of death, she said, quote, to work out the time of death is a complicated formula and involves the difference between the body temperature when found and normal temperature. Clothing is also a factor. A calculation has been developed, but it was not relevant to my purpose at the scene. I was not called to make an assessment of the time of death. If you take a temperature at any other time than at Southwood and Ferrers police station, integrity would have been lost, meaning integrity of the scene. The accuracy of such a calculation would have diminished. I did not disturb the integrity of the vehicle at the scene of the crime. The bodies remained in the vehicle for the purposes of transportation. At the police station, the bodies were positioned as I had seen them at the scene. Rigor had started before the time I saw the bodies for the first time at the scene. Rigor mortis starts at a certain time. It may start within about 2 or 4 hours of death. Okay, let's just cut in here. Now, I really don't agree with what's being stated there, to be perfectly honest. The fact that they have moved the vehicle, they've put a tarpaulin over the Range Rover, they haven't secured the victims in the Range Rover, they've driven back to the police station, they've driven back to the police pound, they've repositioned the bodies and then taken photographs, yet they're saying that they had to do that to preserve the integrity of the crime scene. The crime scene is down Workhouse Lane. That's where everything should have taken place. The removal of the bodies, trying to ascertain the time of death, all this sort of talk about, okay, we couldn't touch the vehicle because it would contaminate it or it would sort of make getting the time of death less accurate. I mean, what the hell are they talking about there? Taking the vehicle to Southwood and Ferrers police station, removing the bodies, and then trying to ascertain a time of death. Surely it would be more accurate closer to the time they actually died. Does that not make sense? To me, what is being stated there by Dr. Lanas doesn't actually make any logical sense whatsoever. But critically, it mentions again there that the bodies were repositioned as I had seen them at the scene. So they've got this vehicle back to Southwood and Ferrers. They've repositioned the bodies because obviously they've moved all over the place, haven't they, during this transportation from Workhouse Lane to the police station. As I say, and I can't stress this enough, these individuals didn't even have a seatbelt on. So they're going to be moving around, aren't they? They're going to be... I don't want to, it's a disturbing thought, isn't it? But it's the truth. They were moving about in the vehicle. So when they've got the vehicle back to South Woodham, they've had to reposition the bodies and then take photographs as if they were found in that exact same position. But they weren't, were they? Because they had to be repositioned. That's the whole point. They're repositioning the bodies before taking the crime scene photographs back at the police pound. To me, that just doesn't make any sense. And I think that's also relevant when we take a look at, as I say, Craig Rolfe's left foot being on the brake, the way his hands appear on the steering wheel, all that sort of stuff that doesn't make any sense when you take a look at it. And this explains it, doesn't it? It's because the bodies have been repositioned on purpose before those photographs were taken. Then she said, quote, "The circumstances of my examination did not permit examination of the time of death. It depends how valuable and how relevant it is whether it can be done. I do not currently ascertain the time of death in this type of situation particularly." End quote. That means that it is not her practice. She was asked about hypostasis, which is the deep pink coloration seen in the lower parts of the body where the blood has drained to. She said it was of very limited assistance. Quote, "These parameters do not hold up. There is no accuracy in calculating from these factors. In many cases, such things are taken, and in many cases they are not. Calculations depend on such things as heating, clothing, drafts, and where the windows are open." End quote. In re-examination, she said the proximity of the weapon to the wound is judged by the burning, the cloud and blackening, and the size of the wound. It does not exceed more than 3 inches. There are factors which would indicate that the skin was close to the muzzle at the time of discharge. She said in Tucker's case too, it indicates that the muzzle is close to the head at the time of discharge. Quote, "To get that from the flame burning and the size of the wound, I would put it at a 9-inch range." End quote.